If you've watched any of my other videos, you already know a lot about my story of multiple myeloma. I thought I would some of you asked for a little bit more about that, and so I thought about something that was kind of funny that happened. It's funny now looking back on it, but I'll call this the Camperman episode. So if you watched the other videos, you know that my L5 vertebra collapsed, and I walked around on a collapsed vertebra for about a week and a half. Ended up in a local hospital. I had a bad reaction to some pain meds and woke up the next morning running 103 fever, and I was shaking like I was having seizures, and room was spinning. I basically felt like I was seasick, and for any of you that have ever been seasick, you know that's not a pleasant experience. And they didn't really know what was going on with me, but I'll leave all that for another video maybe. But anyway, I was in the hospital. I think I got in on went in on Tuesday, got out on Sunday. I still couldn't eat. I lied to them, told them I could, and got home. And the first thing that happened when I got home is I got in the bed because I was exhausted, and our Labrador decided she was so glad to see me, she took a running leap and jumped right in the middle of my stomach, even though I had broken ribs and vertebra. But anyway, so a lot of that week I wasn't very functional, to say the least. I knew I was going to be going to UAMS in Little Rock, and I think I got home on Sunday. I was finally able to start eating on Thursday. I had lost about 18 pounds from Tuesday to Thursday of the next week, so I was not in good shape. Well, anyway, UAMS calls, I think on Friday maybe, and I answered the phone. They told me who they were, and they were trying to set up my appointment to go there, and they said, "When can you come?" I was like, "I can come whenever, sooner the better." "Okay, we'll be here Monday at 8 o'clock. I'm like, "Okay." I hang up the phone. Now you got to understand that my mind was not in the best place at that time. I had no business having a conversation with anybody, much less a hospital, about my care. And I turn around and tell my wife, saying, "Hey, we're supposed to be at, that was UAMS, we're supposed to be there Monday morning at 8. She says, "Okay, well, how long are we going to be there?" "Yeah, I didn't ask them." "Well, what are they going to do? Are they just testing, or are they going to start treatments, or what are they going to do?" "Yeah, I didn't ask them." So long story short, it's a wonder she didn't put a knife in me before we ever got that far. But my wife is a very special person to put up with me, to say the least. But so we show up at UAMS, and you got to understand, I'd never heard of multiple myeloma, and one of the few things I remembered, I didn't remember much about my week in the hospital, but one of the few things I did remember was them telling me don't Google it, because the information was old and inaccurate. And normally I'm the kind of person, the moment you tell me not to do something, that's when I'm going to do it, and I just never did. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, it's not brain cancer, it's not pancreatic cancer, it's some kind of junior league cancer, I'll be all right. And she knew what we were facing. I at least had some concept, I guess you'd say. So we're in the waiting area, and this man comes up, and we're just so green, we don't know anything. All we know at this point is the insurance may or may not pay for me to be treated there. I mean, it's that fresh. And this man walks up to me, and he said, "Are you new here?" I was like, "Yes, sir." He said, he said, "Multiple myeloma?" "Yes, sir." He said, "Man, let me tell you, you're in the best place in the world to be treated for multiple myeloma." He said, "When I came here 7 years ago, everybody thought I was a dead man. I was in a wheelchair." And he said, "Now I'm doing great, and I'm back working my cattle, and you know, just living a good life." And I really hope he never sees this video, because he would feel terrible. But anyway, I said, "Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me. You know, that's great. Thank you." And he said, yeah, but it took a while for them to treat me, so I just moved my camper here and lived here for 2 years while they treated me. And I'm telling you, at that moment, my world stopped. I'm sitting here thinking, 2 years? I can't come here for 2 years. You know, I've got a business, we'll be bankrupt. I've got a daughter that's 14 in school. I can't move her to a new school. And, you know, my life insurance premiums are paid and I know where I stand with God. I don't have to do this. All these thoughts are flashing through my mind so quickly. You know, I've nearly died a few times, and that whole thing about your life flashing before your eyes, it happens. And that's what was happening to me at that very moment, because I'm sitting there going, I'm not doing this to my family. You know, my biggest concern was being a burden to my family. It wasn't really living or dying. I've nearly died a bunch of times during my life due to my own stupidity. And I figured out a long time ago, none of us are getting out of life alive. And I looked over at my wife, and the look on her face just absolutely broke my heart. And he would not stop talking. He's like, yeah, just bring your camping rig over to Miss So-and-so's campground and you know, tell her you're being treated here and that I sent you and she'll take great care of you. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, my wife is not high maintenance, but she's not staying in a camper for 2 years. That's just not happening. And I wouldn't do that to her. I mean, that's just not her thing. And he just wouldn't stop talking. And I could tell she was just about in tears. And I was sitting next to her, and I actually sent her a text and said, this just got real. Because it hit us that neither of us really understood what we were in for. And finally he walked off, and I mean, we couldn't even look at each other. We were in such shock. And look, I'm not criticizing this man whatsoever. He was trying to help us. But it just didn't go the way he thought it did. And I would never want him to feel bad about it if he ever did see this video. I'm actually standing out in the swamp behind my house again, and now we've got a helicopter flying over, so hopefully you can hear me over the helicopter. So yeah, there it is. Anyway, so finally, you know, he walks off and we're just sitting there in shock. And UAMS, and I'm sure other hospitals have this too, they have these wonderful volunteers. We had a volunteer named Judy, and I'll never forget her. She was just truly an angel. She was so sweet. I don't know about her background, but I'm fairly certain, I bet money on it, she was a teacher at some point. You can just usually tell. And anyway, the volunteers, they take new patients around the hospital to get them to their testing and the places they need to be, because it's a big place. And anyway, they had dropped me off for a test, and my wife said she just fell apart, and Judy, you know, talked to her and she told her what the guy said, and Judy said, you know, that's not the way it normally is. He shouldn't have told you that. And anyway, so she and I got back together later on, and you know, we kind of talked about it, and we were just on this emotional roller coaster. Just 1 minute we're okay, and the next minute we just don't even know what we're going to do, and you know, we just don't know what this whole process looks like. And so the next day I go for my first bone marrow biopsy there. I'd had one at my local hospital where they had diagnosed me, but UAMS wanted to do one also, and they couldn't get me in for sedation. So I go in there, and the doctor, he's fairly young, and he tells me, Mr. Stevenson, we're gonna give you a local, we're gonna give you a local to kill the pain on the surface, you know, but we're gonna drill a hole in your hip bone and open that enclosed cavity to air, and we're gonna put a tool in there and draw fluid out. And the bad news is that pain's gonna be off the charts. The good news is it's over very quickly. So I don't mind telling you that I was a little bit nervous. And plus I had fractured vertebra and fractured ribs, and we had to pile all these pillows up just so I could lay on the table flat. And anyway, so he's talking to me and trying to keep me calm. And he said, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a financial advisor. I'm a lot smarter than I look. Well, he started laughing, and we just started talking about, what he should look for in a financial advisor. And anyway, after it was all over with, I was getting dressed and he handed me a card and he said, "Here's my name and phone number." He said, "When things settle down for you," he said, "give me a call so we can discuss you being my financial advisor." And I don't know how to explain it. I'm not trying to push my beliefs on anyone. I can just tell you what my beliefs are. But at that very moment, I knew it was God telling me everything was going to be okay. I had a peace wash over me that is just indescribable. And, God was telling me everything was going to be okay, that my business might even grow from it. Don't worry. I know people that don't believe like I do. It probably doesn't make sense to you, and I understand that. But from that moment on, I never worried about whether I was going to live or die. I never worried about being a burden to my family, which was the big one, as I said. And I walked out of that room with a freshly drilled hole in my hip bone, and I walked up to my wife, and she looked at me and she said, "Why are you grinning?" And I said, "Well, you won't believe what happened." And I told her. And then he came out to check on me, and we visited for a few minutes. And he and I actually, we became friends. And, I still touch base with him occasionally. He's not there anymore, but just a great guy. And come to find out, he had had cancer when he was a teenager. And, so one thing I'd like for all of you to do, if you're being treated for cancer, ask your medical team why they do what they do. Talk to the doctor. Talk to your nurses, everybody, and say, "What made you get into this for a living?" And I'm going to tell you that most of them have a personal story. My multiple myeloma specialist, he had somebody in his family that had a blood cancer. Not too long ago, I went over to Dallas and met with Dr. Brian Berryman and at Texas Oncology in Baylor, and his mom had multiple myeloma. He's pretty open about that, so that's why I don't mind sharing this. I don't like to share people's private business. But almost everybody involved with cancer care has a personal story. And it means something when you know that about them. That's why they have a passion for what they do. So, I kind of really wasn't planning on going there in this video, but I just think it's important to know. And it's a really good question to ask. And anytime you start wondering, and I see all this crazy stuff on the internet about, there's too much money in treating people to cure them and all that. And there's nothing that these people would like more than to work themselves out of a job. The day I talked to Dr. Van Ree and told him about the Multiple Myeloma Warrior Community Facebook group I'd started, and Dr. Van Ree, and we get along great, and he's such a wonderful person, but he doesn't show a lot of emotion. And he actually got up and started walking towards me with his hands kind of spread apart, and it actually confused me. It's like, what is he doing? Then I realized he's coming to hug me. And he hugged me and he said, "Thank you for what you're doing to try to help patients, and whatever you need." And that shows the commitment and the passion that's there to help people. And he's not the only one. I mean, that's just my personal example. And I've gotten to know so many of the specialists, like Dr. Berryman and Dr. Karina Patel down at MD Anderson, and there's so many more around the country that I've had a chance to visit with, and just their passion for curing us is it's amazing, and we need to remember that they're people too. So anyway, longer video than I meant to make, but hopefully you get something out of this. If you want some more videos, just let me know, and and I'll keep making them. Take care.